and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and tonight I'm going to break down everything that happened from Week 15 NFL Sunday, semifinals of most of your fantasy football championships out there. I sincerely hope that you all were able to capture the win, unless you were, of course, against another listener, and that'd be a pretty awkward position for me. You know, hopefully you guys tied and both advantaged something. I don't know. I'll think the rest of that through later. Anyway, purpose of this podcast is to go through every game from Sunday. I want to, focus a little bit on the main, top performers and stuff, but more than anything, I've had a chance to go through every game, watch it either live or on, NFL Game Pass condensed sense. Want to point out some of the beyond the box score stuff, who should have had a touchdown with a better pass, who dropped a touchdown, who had a back-breaking fumble that could have changed the tide of the day, stuff like that. So if you missed the Saturday games real quick, credit to the Bills and Packers on getting the wins. Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs were absolutely amazing. Aaron Rodgers hardly on top of his game with 5 sacks and only 143 yards on 29 attempts. But hey, when you got Aaron Jones, plenty good enough to get the job done. Also, got to give credit to DJ Moore for his 131 receiving yards. Throw the ball to DJ Moore and good things happen. Without further ado, though, let's stick to the Sunday matchups. I want to start off with the Cowboys' 41-33 victory over the 49ers. And this was like a throwback to kind of the Dak era Cowboys, just a complete shootout with some funky just end of the game scoring business going back and forth. But Andy Dalton, hey, wins and win. He was 209 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, had numerous throws he missed out there, but give the guy credit. To me, this was Dalton's third best game of the year behind what he did against the Bengals and against the Vikings. This was a defense that also isn't great at getting to the passer. That's why I think we saw him have the, moderate success that he did. But hey, give him some credit. I mean, he had some awesome downfield throws, notably to CeeDee Lamb on 2 occasions. He took 2 sacks, but hey, this was his third best game of the season. I think that, the Red Rocket out there, he's someone I've been pretty critical of throughout this season. But hey, in his defense, playing behind this lackluster offensive line with all the injuries they've had, can't expect all that much more. The big story of the day, though, was Tony Pollard getting the spot start with Ezekiel Elliott sideline due to a calf injury. Broke a 40-yard touchdown to ice things at the end. Guy broke no fewer than 3 broken tackles on his way to the end zone. So just, a great game. This was a condensed offense here, and we saw Pollard play 90% of this backfield snaps. Usually it's Zeke in that 60-70% range mode, and Pollard has actually been playing 30-40% in recent weeks. In the past, really when Dak was under center, it was full on Zeke, 80% plus. But, whether it's them just realizing that Pollard's been really efficient with his touches or kind of penalizing Zeke for all the fumbles throughout the year, Pollard, even before Zeke sat down, was eating more into his workload than we've seen in past years. But just a great game from Pollard. He started off pretty hot and he was doing good through the air. He actually had 6 catches for 63 yards on 9 targets in this one. So, CeeDee Lamb had 85 yards, but nobody else was over even 30 receiving yards. Pollard wasn't having the great game. We were going to be in a situation where if he didn't break that 40-yarder, everyone could take away his one good, 20-yard run and say he wasn't that great. The rest of the game didn't matter. He was able to ice it when it mattered. So look, we got this news early in the morning. We were on the PFF Sunday show, and I went to Twitter and just basically said, hey, he's my, a top 12 RB on the week. Don't freak out. Don't start him over, David Montgomery or Alvin Kamara or all these studs at the top, but I'm happy we went ahead, took him ahead of the 49ers guys, took him ahead of, just Leonard Fournette and just these other people. And the main reason was because, it wasn't just that Tony Pollard is this great talent. It was more because if you take away Zeke from this backfield, who else do they have? I mean, they had something named Rico Dowdle, whose name I have not even heard of until today, also getting touches back there. So, it's more of a game of opportunity. We failed a few times, chasing opportunity with Duke Johnson and some other types. So there is a balance to find in between talent and opportunity, but in general, people continue to chase that opportunity. As long as Zeke is out, Tony Pollard has plenty of it. He'll be an RB1 in week 16 if Zeke remains sidelined. So with the 49ers, Nick Mullins, not his best game by any stretch of the imagination. I feel like every Nick Mullins game is almost the same. He'll make a couple big throws, he has more of an off-script game to him than Jimmy Garoppolo. So when he's playing well, you can kind of talk yourself into it, maybe being a competition at some point, but then usually get some sacks, some back-breaking interceptions, and ultimately things get away from the offense. So that was the, case in this one. Credit to him for feeding Brandon Ayuk another 13 targets. He caught 9 of them for 73 yards and a score, but, obviously this wasn't enough to quite get them in front in this one. Jeff Wilson had 16 carries, 60 yards, and a touchdown. He was working really far behind Raheem Mostert to start, which made no sense because Mostert was the one coming into the game so banged up, but Wilson ended up getting a lot of the run. And then when Mostert hurt his ankle, that's really when Wilson came in. So, we never really quite know what's going on with this backfield. We saw Tevin Coleman getting there a little bit at the end. Same thing with Jerick McKinnon. So, a situation where I think we all thought Jeff Wilson was starting to break out, but now both him and Mostert have ankle injuries, so going to be tough to really feel good about anyone in this offense in week 16 and beyond. Real quickly at the end, some just, like I said, goofiness that was going on. CeeDee Lamb returned an onside kick for a touchdown, which was a lot of fun. We saw A.J. Brown do that earlier this year. Just, great wide receiver ones making plays. One just a legit PPR wide receiver one, A.J. Brown. The other one, CeeDee Lamb. I think anyone's idea of a wide receiver one in Dynasty at this point. And then also, last play of the game, C.J. Beathard came in for Nick Mullins, who apparently suffered an elbow injury. Tosses a Hail Mary, and Kendrick Bourne went up and got it 49 yards, came down with it for the score. So, again, a little bit inflated with CD's, extra touchdown on that and Kendrick Bourne coming down with it. But you know what? Big players make big plays in big games. Give them credit. I think I mentioned most of the injuries. Michael Gallup also had a hip injury, so that could further condense some of the Cowboys' target share. And yeah, Mostert, Wilson with the ankles, Nick Mullins with the elbow. So PFF Lily matchup stat. For those new to the podcast, every matchup I like to give a specific stat called PFF Lily because I have a 25.5-pound wiener dog named Lily, thus PFF Lily. So without further ado, the PFF Lily matchup stat: 56 RBs have had 150 plus carries over the past 2 seasons. Guys, Tony Pollard ranks number 4 in PFF rushing grade, number 1 in forced missed tackles per attempt. He's number 5 in yards per carry and number 1 in yards after contact per attempt at 4.2. So literally, Tony Pollard, and I even took the carries down because I know 150, maybe that's a little bit too, random of a threshold for some people. I just took 100 rush attempts over the past 2 years. Doesn't matter. Tony Pollard, number 1 in forced missed tackles per attempt, number 1 yards after contact per attempt. I understand Ezekiel Elliott has disappointed relative to that $90 million contract, but seriously, I think we would be having these, free Tony Pollard deserves more touches, etc. type discussions on pretty much any team in the league. Buccaneers took down the Falcons 31-27. This was not easy for Tampa Bay. I, had them in pretty much every parlay that was floating out there. Thought this one would not be hard, and they made us sweat. 17-0 Falcons lead with by halftime. But Matt Ryan doing the damn thing. 356 yards, 3 touchdowns through the air. Didn't have any turnovers. Well-thrown touchdowns to Calvin Ridley, Russell Gage, Hayden Hurst. It was good to see him go out there and put this sort of game together without Julio Jones, because it really has been more bad than good with Julio's sideline this year, which I get, but we are talking about ex MVP out there, so you would like to see a little bit more. But in general, I just think this Falcons team this year as a whole has been just far less talented than we've seen in the past. So I'm not saying Ryan's, is on the doorstep of the end of his career or anything like that. Not a great season, but I think, the big difference between this year and past years, probably not so much Matt Ryan, probably more so the supporting cast around him. Nothing against Julio and Ridley, but just look, if there's one injury to anywhere on this offense, they're painfully thin behind them. The offensive line has largely been a train wreck all year. That's not even talking about the defense. So it is what it is. They only ran the ball 13 total times in this game. 17-0 lead at halftime, only ran the ball 13 times. Todd Gurley had 1 rush for -1 yards. I just wonder if he's even going to be in the league next year. Remember, the NFL players, they do their yearly 100 list. I believe they ranked Todd Gurley as the 52nd best player in the league last season. Time comes at you fast for sure. But yeah, I mentioned, Ryan played well to win, but Calvin Ridley was the one that truly balled out in this one. 10 catches on 14 targets, 163 yards, and a touchdown. Every time he gets more than 8 targets, I just tweet out all of his career game lines with at least 8 targets, because literally his worst one was a 6-catch, 50-yard, and a touchdown performance. When the guy gets the volume, he has not done it yet. He's gotten the volume all season long. And all those offseason, cries about, 2019 Chris Godwin being 2020 Calvin Ridley, haven't quite crunched the specific numbers just yet, but we are truly seeing Ridley, emerge as anyone's idea of a top 10 weekly fantasy football wide receiver with the Buccaneers. So yeah, this was a tough spot. They didn't have anything, or it wasn't a tough spot, but it was a tough spot for them in the second half after they were down 17-0, the freaking Falcons. Brady came roaring back though, 390 yards, pair of touchdowns. Just really one good throw after another. They could have had a really long pass interference on Tyler Johnson. That was a pretty deep ball from Brady, but we just saw him step up. They started getting it to Mike Evans, who had 2 catches that downed him inside the 5-yard line, ended up finishing one of the drives with a short score to Chris Godwin. Leonard Fournette found his way into the end zone twice from the 1-yard line. The big bomb was a 46-yarder to Antonio Brown. That was the go-ahead score. They finally hooked up on a deep one. So this was a game that we saw, again, Evans go for 110, AB 93 yards in the score, Chris Godwin 36 yards in the score. We've been preaching on this podcast the upside of this Tampa Bay passing game, basically saying it's not Evans or Brown or Godwin, it's Evans and Brown and Godwin, because Brady and this offense might be able to put up enough points to truly enable all 3 of these guys. We finally saw that. So, last week it wasn't so good, but again, that was only because he had to throw the ball just 23 times against against the Minnesota Vikings. So Lions on deck in week 16, and we got to go back to the well with all these Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Leonard Fournette wound up being the workhorse, played 65% of the offensive snaps. I was surprised to see that. So, LaShawn McCoy only 18%, Keyshawn Vaughn 15%. What I thought, it would be more of a split backfield because Fournette wasn't even active in, week 14. So I knew he was coming back to steal, Ronald Jones' early down work, but to see Fournette also lead the way with 5 targets compared to, only 3 for Shady and only 1 for Keyshawn Vaughn after he had seemingly lost his pass down job to them, it was surprising. Fournette was, very replaceable throughout the game. He did have one 17-yard run where he showed a nice little shake and bake ability, made a dude miss, but all in all, just kind of a disappointing performance. But hey, volume is volume. He gets the Lions next week. This Buccaneers team is going to be implied by Vegas to score 30-plus points. It's going to be awfully hard to keep Fournette out of the top 15 running backs if Ronald Jones remains sidelined. No injuries in this one to my knowledge, which is good. Make sure you check out the Tuesday edition of this podcast. I briefly break down Monday Night Football and then go through all the waiver wire claims. We usually have a little more injury information by that point. PFF Lily matchup stat. So look, in this new offense, it was Bruce Arians, no risk it, no biscuit, but I think a lot of us just expected Brady to do his usual stick, one just pick route after another, a lot of throws to the running back and things of that nature. And sure, they've done that to some extent, but 9.8 yard average target depth for Brady. That's the second highest mark of his career. 62% of his passing yards have come on air yards. That's the second highest mark of his career. Tom Brady is being asked to do more than he really has in recent memory in this offense. And to be fair, he is responding. Has Tom Brady been a top 5 quarterback this year? No, but I think he'd be very hard pressed to find 10 better than him. Through 14 weeks now, he has through 15 weeks, 34 big-time throws, only 11 turnover-worthy plays. Look, in 2019, he only had 23 big-time throws, 17 turnover-worthy plays. In 2018, 29 big-time throws, 16 turnover-worthy plays. I understand, this hasn't been a team that's really met. To this point, they're just sky-high preseason expectations, but they're 9-5. They got the Lions and they got the Falcons. By all accounts, this is going to be an 11-5 team going to the playoffs with, 4 straight pretty commanding victories to their credit. So they're getting hot at the right time. Again, it's never been a situation with Brady having a noodle arm. Quit saying that, people. It's just not even true. If it is true, we'll let you know. It hasn't been the case in 2020. Tom Brady and company, they've played really well at times, blowing out the Green Bay Packers, playing the Chiefs down to 3 points. I know the Chiefs were up a bit in that one. Oh man, the skid mark still on Carlton Davis probably, but just realize, in NFC where we've seen the Seahawks, shit the bed against the Washington football team, against the Giants. We saw the Rams lose to the Jets. Like, the NFC is so wide open right now. Don't be surprised if the Buccaneers end up being the team that rises to the top. With that said, Packers, Seahawks, Saints, Rams, it's so wide open. You gotta love it. These playoffs are going to be a lot of fun. Next matchup, we got the Titans defeating the Lions 46-25. What a performance from this Titans offense in general, and specifically Mr. Ryan Tannehill. We've all been talking about the Derrick Henry chase for 2K and all that, but Tannehill keeps on keeping on himself, really, over the past 2 years. Anyone's idea of a top 10 real life and fantasy quarterback. Ended up throwing for 273 yards, 3 scores on just 27 attempts, and he chipped in 2 rushing touchdowns. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard this. I don't want to spoil, to give away too good of a stat, but Ryan Tannehill used to play wide receiver. I know. Shocked me too. But anyway, a 75-yard touchdown to Corey Davis on a well-thrown deep ball. Again, Tannehill was just really making all sorts of plays. The only bad thing he did was he took a safety, and I think that kind of reflects the only hole in his game at this point. We see him hold on to the ball for too long at times, but I think this Titans offense does such a good job utilizing play action, getting him, outside the pocket on bootlegs and things like that. Imagine Tannehill, I understand he's not the fastest quarterback in the league, but he's a very good athlete. Again, a wide receiver, guys. But when you send Derrick Henry going one way and you immediately bootleg Tannehill the other way, I can see how that'd be a freaking problem for defensive ends and how they wouldn't be so willing to hang back for Tannehill when you're trying to slow down Derrick freaking Henry, who was as beastly as ever in this one. 24 carries, 147 yards, and a score with a pretty commanding 62% snap rate. So look, this offense is humming. Corey Davis had a big day, 4 catches, 110 yards, and a score. AJB, wide receiver 1 season, continues again, 5 catches, 44 yards, and a short 2-yard score at the end of the game when they tried to guard him with a linebacker on the goal line. Can't do that. But look, this offense, I wrote an article a few weeks ago about just AJ Brown, Corey Davis, and what the difference is between last year and this year. Tannehill, AJ Brown, and Derrick Henry have been legit QB1, RB1, and wide receiver 1s over the past 2 seasons. And now the offense is at least condensed enough and they're high scoring enough to also add Corey Davis to that mix as a legit upside wide receiver 2 on a weekly basis. So also Jonnu Smith, he's probably going to be a tight end 1 when the season's over. I know he had a lot of those touchdowns earlier in the year, but did manage to catch 5 passes for 52 yards in this one. So Titans offense, do not mess with these guys. It's going to be, I think the AFC isn't quite as wide open as the NFC or anything. We all know the Chiefs are the, large favorite. But between Tennessee, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, and some of these other teams that could potentially make some noise and give the Chiefs some problems, I think there's some discussions to be had about who has the best chance. And the Titans, their defense didn't play great today, but when this offense is humming, they are very, very hard to be stopped. With the with the Lions, Matthew Stafford, credit to him for gutting it out. They just couldn't really get enough going in this one. It wasn't his fault. Deandre Swift fumbled right at the goal line trying to reach that ball out. Could have had a 3-touchdown day if he didn't lose that fumble, so that was disappointing to see. Also, TJ Hawkinson had a fumble all the way down at the Titans' 20-yard line after they had managed to drive fairly deep into the field. So, again, solid enough game for Matthew Stafford. He had a beautiful throw down the sideline to Quintez Cephas. Truly, the arm talent on Stafford is just wild to see. Usually every single week he makes at least 1 or 2 throws that make you scratch your head and just wonder how he even got it there. So didn't get the win, but you give up 46 points. It was going to take an A+ effort from everybody involved to try to get that going. So Deandre Swift mentioned he had the 2 touchdowns and went ahead and really dominated snaps again, 65% snaps. And this was the second straight week that we did see the Lions trail a lot, and because of that we don't necessarily know if Swift would be the lead back if they're in a positive game script. But you know what, the Buccaneers are next week. I think we can all probably agree that they're not going to be ahead for too long in that game. Hey, weird things have happened. The Jets just beat the Rams, for crying out loud. But either way, DeAndre Swift is right back in that borderline RB1 conversation. He's looked, as healthy as ever over the past 2 weeks following that concussion and then the illness following it. He catches passes. He's their goal line rusher. They have no problem using him over Adrian Peterson in short yardage situations. He's not there. All right. He's not there every time goal line rusher, but as we explained on this podcast, really no teams have it. The key is they have no reservations about DeAndre Swift on the goal line, which means they're not going to go out of their way to take him off the field when they get in scoring position. And guess what? He's their primary running back, so he should continue to get those opportunities. So DeAndre Swift, borderline RB1 next week against the Buccaneers, even though that's not the most ideal matchup looking at their run defense. Last note, Marvin Jones, again, people, borderline wide receiver too. As we've been telling you with Kenny Galladay out, caught 10 to 12 targets for 112 yards and a touchdown. Just a great game from Marvin. Had a bunch of catches that usually featured him extending and diving for the ball. He's been one of the best contested catch receivers in the league over the past few years. Not the same explosive athlete. I think that we're going to see the end comes sooner rather than later. But you look at the season he's put together, and it's really not been that bad, particularly without having someone like Kenny Galladay to help pull away the defense's attention. No injuries, I believe, in this one. But yeah, buried the lead a little bit. But let's face it, everything about the Titans these days is about Derrick Henry and that chase for 2,000 yards. So he is at 1,679 rushing yards to this point. So he needs 321 more, 160.5 per game. And our PFF matchup stat, the only RBs in NFL history with 2,000 rushing yards in this season: 1973 O.J. Simpson, 1984 Eric Dickerson, 1997 Barry Sanders, 1998 Terrell Davis, 2003 Jamal Lewis, 2009 Chris Johnson, CJ2K, of course, and most recently 2012 Adrian Peterson. So this has been quite the gap, and we haven't had a gap this long since would have been 1984 Eric Dickerson and 1997 Barry Sanders. So, with the NFL going not only more pass heavy, but just more RB committee heavy, it's worth wondering if Derrick Henry can pull this off, this year. I wouldn't say no one will ever do it again. You don't ever want to say that, and the game could evolve and stuff. But, we could see a pretty long gap here, I think, coming up if we don't see Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, one of these, Saquon Barkley, one of these last running backs who just gets these true featured roles. Because, again, they're few and far between these days. And I think as more and more of the old school coaches leave, we're just going to see committees continue to run rampant in today's NFL, which makes sense. But in fantasy football, you got to love those workhorse RBs. Next matchup, we got the Colts defeating the Texans 27-20. These teams cannot play each other without making it a great one, at least in the year 2020. This was another game that Deshaun Watson did everything he pretty much needed to win or at least get to overtime. If you remember, they were going down to score the potential go-ahead touchdown against the Colts in Week 13. Bad snap to Deshaun Watson inside the 5-yard line resulted in the Colts getting the recovery. So in this one, Watson got back to his, just high-end production ways, 373 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, also chipped in 25 rushing yards, but At the end of the game, zips one over the middle. Kiki Kuti makes a catch. He gets down. He's fighting for extra yards. I don't know if he would have scored. He was getting pretty close. Either way, he fumbled the ball into the end zone. Colts recovered. Game over. So very disappointing to see that and him lose that fumble. I mean, look, Deshaun lost a fumble, but no picks. He did take 5 sacks. But, with Deshaun, with Russ, even we're seeing with Jalen Hurts a little bit, like these guys are going to take sacks because they can create so well. With Mahomes, they can create so well at times. Like, why wouldn't they try to make something happen? And yeah, it's annoying when they take these sacks sometimes, particularly when they're running around really far in the backfield and they can really quickly kill a drive. But you know what? Like a type of player that is taking those chances, those are the guys that can usually get you out of those 3rd and 18 holes and those, plays when you're really far against the sticks anyway. So, hey, it's a smarter in the long run to probably just get rid of the ball, live to play another day. Yeah, but you also kind of have a wider range of outcomes, both in the positive and negative direction when you have these guys like Watson more willing to extend the plays. So again, maybe not his best game of the year, but certainly another performance that proved that he is a top 5 real life and fantasy quarterback. Disappointing 4-10 record on the year, but believe me, he has been better than ever. Interesting enough, I mentioned the Kiki Kuti touchdown. Chad Hansen had a touchdown on just like a broken coverage on a deeper cross. Brandon Cooks was back in action. He had 6 catches, 59 yards. But the Texans' leading receiver with Duke Johnson sidelined, Mr. David Johnson caught all 11 of his targets for 106 yards. Fairly fluky, guys. Deshaun Watson does not usually throw to his running backs. I mean, these were not design touches. They were him running around until David Johnson flashed open and he was able to throw him the ball downfield. So not saying David Johnson needs to be, jumped up into the top 10 of our running back ranks for week 16, but they are playing the Bengals. Duke's not out there, and we saw that without Duke, David did play a dominant 79% snap rate. So David, it's going to be hard to keep him out of the top 16 running backs against the Bengals next week, particularly without Duke there to really take away any of these targets. All right, moving on to the Colts now. Yeah, so again, Texans lost, but much better 4-10 team, particularly at the quarterback position than you would expect. With the Colts, Phillip Rivers, only 6 incompletions on 28 attempts, 228 passing yards, and 2 touchdowns. Like, I just haven't been putting Phillip Rivers as a start really at all this year because these are the types of games we see. Very efficient, but there just isn't that much of a ceiling for fantasy land because he has like a negative rushing upside. He literally had -1 rushing yard this game, and we don't even get the luck out on QB sneak touchdowns because Jacoby Brissett comes in and does that for them, and Jacoby even threw a pass in this one, so that was wild to see. But just kind of the story that we've been driving home on this podcast all year. The Colts just wide receiver room is so spread out, and we saw that again in this one. Zach Pascal had 6 targets, T.Y. Hilton had 6 targets, and it was Pascal that ended up scoring twice. So T.Y.'s been the guy in recent weeks, and he did have a huge 41-yard catch at the end of this game down the seam, pretty ball by Rivers to put them in position to even win the game. So T.Y. still played great, but just in terms of fantasy between Pittman, Hilton, Pascal, and all the running backs and tight ends, just not enough pass volume to go around for all these guys with Phillip Rivers spreading it out. So, hey, they're 10-4. He's engineered a great offense all season, both passing and running. It just hasn't been all that conducive to fantasy success with how spread out it's consistently been. The backfield was, actually dominated more by Jonathan Taylor than we've seen. I'm just looking at these snaps. Jordan Wilkins out of the picture, and we saw Jonathan Taylor have 70% snaps and Nyheim Hines down there at 30%. So Taylor had 16 carries, Hines had 5. Not too many targets for Taylor, only 4 of them, but was able to catch all 4. Nyheim Hines caught 2 of his 3. So look, Jonathan Taylor kept on playing great. This was one where, again, just more and more of these past few weeks, he's breaking tackles. He looks like a hoss to get down, man. I know we were starting to wonder, like, could Jonathan Taylor be that next Wisconsin RB that just doesn't quite work out for whatever reason? But really, over these past 3-4 weeks, I know the defenses haven't been great, but just the physicalness with which he's running, however the hell you say that phrase, but he's been playing great football over the past few weeks. And look, as long as he can stay behind his beast offensive line and not have the Jordan Wilkins guy taking away early down work, Jonathan Taylor's going to be flirting with, borderline RB1 production all the way through the 2021 season, if not higher. Look, Nyheim Hines probably isn't going anywhere, and he is the better receiving back. I don't see Jonathan Taylor completely taking over, but he's a competent enough receiver to get some targets, particularly with, a target just feeder to the running back position like Phillip Rivers under center. And again, if we don't have to worry about someone like Jordan Wilkins taking away the garbage time work and just some of the goal line work, we're truly going to be talking about anyone's idea of an RB1 in 2021 and beyond and Jonathan Taylor. Only injury I really saw was Marcus Johnson, one of the Colts backup wide receivers with a quad, but losing him doesn't really open up enough to feel good about any other guy in particular. PFF matchup stats. So Last week, Jonathan Taylor broke a season-high 9 tackles on the ground. This week, he averaged a season-high 3.6 yards after contact per carry. So again, this is what we expected. But how about his receiving ability? 36 targets, 35 receptions on the year. I have looked at the one incompletion. It was not a drop. It was pretty much Phillip Rivers getting hit as he threw and looking Taylor's direction. So 35 for 36. He's not Nyheim Hines, but this man is a very capable receiver. And considering that was one of the biggest worries about him coming out, very good to see. Only one fumble on the year. Ball security is job security. Jonathan Taylor has that in spades. Next matchup, we had the Dolphins defeat the Patriots 22-12. This was not a good game to watch at all. Not to take anything away from the Dolphins. They were without Devontae Parker, Jakeem Grant, and Mike Gesicki. I mean, the fact that Tua was just able to lead them to a win was enough. I mean, I don't even want to take away too much from his passing numbers. Only 145 yards, 26 attempts. He had a bad interception that was in the end zone, kind of late getting the ball out there. But, that was really just, it was a rare thing to see from him. He's been very good about taking care of the ball all season long. Only took 2 sacks and was able to find the end zone twice as a rusher. So he did account for 2 touchdowns, no fumbles without each of his top 3 receivers. Hard to fault the guy. So hopefully he gets some of those guys back. Again, this was another low volume game, even though he had the 2 rushing touchdowns. He's a mobile guy, but that's not something that's always, a super prevalent part of his game. Next week against the Raiders, though, Tua, he's going to beat it in this upside QB2 conversation. I'm guessing if you made, the fantasy football championship, you're not in a situation where you need to try to stream Tua, but Superflex 2 QB, he could be, certainly in play against the Raiders. We've seen upside from him over these past 2 weeks, particularly in that Chiefs game when they got behind. So I'd be, nervous about going to the well if they don't have any of these wide receivers back. They did run the ball 42 times compared to just 26 pass attempts after all. But Tua, he's really shown a lot over these past few weeks, and I'm excited to see what he can do in 2021 with a better offensive line, hopefully with a few more high-end talent options in addition to, Devontae and Mike Gesicki. Congrats to Salvan Ahmed. Went the hell off. I thought, in his first game back from the shoulder injury, they would kind of ease him back into action. Was not the case. 61% snaps, 23 carries, 122 yards, and a short touchdown. Also had a 2-point conversion. I believe it was him. They ran this sweet play, threw a screen out wide, and the running back came looping out almost like a wheel route motion out of the backfield. Wide receiver caught it, pitched it back to the running back, helped seal him off, and he scored. So it wasn't the first time I've seen it, but it was fun to see, Brian Flores really dig into his bag of tricks to try to get a dub over his former employer and get the dub he did. So look, the big thing was backfield. If Myles Gaskin remains out, he's on the COVID list right now. If he is off the COVID list by next week, it's probably going to be him as the RB1, or it's going to be a split committee. So if that's the situation, then no, Ahmed is not going to be a viable fantasy back. But hey, if Gaskin remains sidelined, yeah, Ahmed is going to be a potential upside RB2 for an offense that we see, not dominating, but they're leaning on the run. And again, this matchup against the Raiders, that's one of those defenses, particularly with all the guys they have out right now, that we truly want to be targeting. So Salvan Ahmed, keep an eye on this guy. If Myles Gaskin remains sidelined, he's going to be a recommended start in the Fantasy Football Championship. And the fact that something named Salvan Ahmed is going to be a recommended start in the Fantasy Football Championship just tells you all you need to know about 2020. Not to take away anything from Salvan. He ran hard in this game. He didn't impress me too much in his first few games, but what the hell do I know anyway? So Salvan, it was good to see him go up in this game, really take the job from Matt Breida, who played well himself, 12 carries, 86 yards, but he's not going to have enough of volume next week. So just realize Gaskin, if he's back, he'll be the recommended play. If not, it's Ahmed. With the Patriots, Cam Newton, another rough one. They were moving the ball through the air for stretches, 209 yards. Jacoby Myers had 7 catches, 111 yards. He did lose a fumble, but he made up for it with some nice catches later in the game. It was just another game where, okay, was Cam making all the throws we wish he'd make? No. Was he exactly missing a bunch of just wide open receivers? No. Was he getting much time to throw? Also no. I mean, the only real consistency in this Patriots offense has been the presence of a solid run game, and that was here in this one. Sony Michelle had 10 carries for 74 yards and only a long run of 17. It wasn't like, he just got lucky with one big one. I was surprised to only see them, run the ball 22 times, but then again, only passed the ball 27 times. Dolphins were able to control the clock, I believe almost 38, minutes of time possession. So just not a game that was all that conducive to fantasy football success with the Patriots. So not anyone you really need to start for the Patriots. They are now officially eliminated from playoff contention. I believe with the last 2 weeks, nothing to play for. That's the first time that's happened in 20 years. Madness. So they got the Bills next. Cam, hey, he's always a threat to find the end zone once or twice, but this backfield remains a committee, even with Damian Harris out of the picture. I mean, we saw James White played 50% snaps here. Sony Michelle 44%. So this is our dream situation for Sony Michelle, but the problem is he's an early down grinder, which is already not helping for full point per reception formats. And then Cam Newton is the most likely guy to score if they get inside the 5-10 yard line. So Sony, James White, Cam, Jacoby. I think the answer is just going to be a no for me for week 16. Injuries to monitor. Stephon Gilmore suffered a knee injury. I believe I saw reports saying it's not believed too serious, but keep an eye on it. I know Stephon Diggs has his foot issue potentially as well, so maybe both of them are out, but no Stephon Gilmore. That's objectively good news for anybody out there. I'm not saying Stephon Diggs can't win that matchup. Hell, Smokey Brown twisted up Stephon Gilmore on a route last year, but with these top cornerback ones, in my opinion, when they're shadowing someone, you don't fade that matchup, but you certainly downgrade your expectations, particularly the ceiling. That would be what we would do with Diggs, but hey, Gilmore's out. Fire away, baby. PFF matchup stat: Dolphins allowed 24 plus points in 12 games last season. This year, they've allowed 24 plus points on just 4 occasions. So even if, they bottom out the next 2 weeks, they allow 24 plus in each game, that's still going to be just half amount as last season. Truly, Brian Flores with this defense has been absolutely phenomenal. And looking at those 4 times, they allowed at least 24 points. They were to the Chiefs, the Bills, the Seahawks, and the Cardinals. Very understandable. Great defensive effort from the Dolphins all season. Tua and company are coming to their own as well. 2022, they're going to be they're 9-5. Like, they're going to the playoffs this year. I get it, but could be as early as 2022, 2023 before we're talking about them as a true dark horse Super Bowl contender. Ways to go. We've only seen, a handful of starts from Tua, but if he can keep improving, they can surround him with better talent. Again, the defense is looking like they could potentially be a juggernaut sooner rather than later if they keep improving in the same manner they have over the past 2 years. Next matchup, we had the Bears defeat the Vikings 33-27. Shout out the Bears, man. Ever since Trubisky's come back after the bye week, I know they're 2-2, but they've been averaging over 30 points per game on offense. And hey, it's just been a step up in watching their games compared to what we saw before. And you know what? For me, I just want entertaining games. That's why I love Drew Lock, Josh Allen, those guys. So it's good to see the Bears at least putting up points. And Mitch Trubisky, hey, 15 for 21, 202 yards, touchdown, 1 brutal interception, which was at the end of the game, and it gave the Vikings a chance to freaking go down and potentially tied, only down 3. So, it was in the end zone. It reminded me of the Detroit Lions game where he had the awful fumble back inside his 5-yard line. This is a problem. Mitch Trubisky has the highest turnover worthy play rate in the league. But, you see the flashes where everything looks fine. It's not like 2018 was that long ago. I understand his 2018 wasn't, playing at an MVP level like we saw with Carson Wentz in 2017 or anything like that. But still, Trubisky has shown, high upside flashes throughout his, short career. And even though they've been a little more few and far between in 2019, 2020, he has been playing some good ball over the past few weeks. So if he can just find a way to limit that back-breaking turnover, the 1 or 2 of those he has every single game, I think we would see, a much just better just overall offensive effort, because that just tends to kind of kill the momentum for them. Because look, he's got, the scrambling ability. He's got the arm. We've seen him, I remember the old memes where he can't throw. I think it's like Trubisky throwing to his right is fantastic, but to his left, he turns into like the small SpongeBob, whatever meme you want to use. But I understand that Trubisky, has his flaws. But again, I just don't think he's gotten enough credit for playing well for stretches during a short career. He should have a playoff win if his kicker could freaking not doink the thing off 2 crossbars. So Trubisky, not playing amazing, but playing much better than, the league worst starting quarterback we thought he was as recently as a month ago. He's at least improved from that. So credit to you, Mitch. The real star of the Chicago Bears, though, was David Montgomery. Dominant 88% snap rate, 32 carries, 146 yards, and a pair of touchdowns. Also chipped in 1 catch for 16 yards. So just balling out all over the place. I am getting upset at this point about the lack of respect for David Montgomery in the fantasy industry, because the season starts, we get through, a good month and a half, and we see him popping up on the top of all these forced missed tackles, metrics that PFF just has, and they're fantastic, and they help show you what ball carriers are winning in one-on-one moments. And, the verdict coming back from everyone is, hey, that's great. He's too slow to make big plays out of it. Well, they play the Packers. He gets a 50-plus yard run. They play the Texans. He goes 80 yards in the score. And the verdict is, hey, that's fine, but he's still someone that, isn't going to have this next year, and he's going to be someone we're going to fade going 2021. I don't even necessarily disagree with that, but look, he is now putting together a top 10 fantasy season at the running back position. That's That's what we want. That is what any running back should want. That's what any fantasy football manager should want from their running back. David Montgomery has given it to us, and I think it's just people not really being super willing to kind of go back on what our opinion was in this guy after the first 10 games of his career. The Bears' offensive line has not been good all season long. They were a bottom 5 unit in yards before contact allowed per carry going into last week. So Montgomery, he hasn't exactly been in a great situation. Would you say having Trubisky and Foles and Chase Daniel under center the last 2 years, are those the type of quarterbacks that we'd expect to, really set up, young running back for success? I don't think so. So Montgomery, he's got a lot of haters out there. I understand Tariq Cohen's going to come back next year, and that's going to really, hurt Montgomery's target share, and we're not even probably see him flirt with, 30 carries or something like that. But hey, if the surrounding cast improves, maybe we'll see, the yards per carry and the scoring upside improve further, because he's doing the right things in terms of just, controlling the controllables, which for him is making guys miss once he gets the ball. So hopefully the rest of the Bears offense can catch up to David Montgomery, because I think you look at the past 2 years, and Allen Robinson is the only guy you can really say on the offense, at least in the skill positions, that's been playing better ball than David Montgomery, and give the man some credit for doing so. With the Vikings, Kirk Cousins had, a Hail Mary at the end of the game to try to win it, but it was intercepted. So, it was another good game by Kirk overall. So don't let that interception really sway your thoughts on the performance. Ended up throwing 2 touchdowns, fumbled once, but didn't lose it. Justin Jefferson, 8 catches, 104 yards. Adam Thielen, only 2 catches for 11 yards, but he scored. And yeah, give Adam Thielen a break too. I'm seeing people just coming at him, almost like empty touchdown numbers. People, points win football games, and Adam Thielen has 13 touchdowns this year. Every time we have one of these wide receiver rooms with 2 great wide receivers, whether it's the Titans with A.J. Brown and Corey Davis, the Rams with Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, even the Seahawks, not too long ago with Metcalf and Lockett, I think we know who's kind of won that argument since. But now we're seeing with Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, where I don't even disagree that we should be ranking Jefferson higher than Thielen at this point, but it's not like they're going to be more than, a 3 to 4 spot disparity between the guys. Both these guys are at worst upside wide receiver 2s in fantasy, and they have been all season long. So, credit to Jefferson for being this damn good as a rookie, but I think because he's been so good, because Stephon Diggs has gone to Buffalo and balled the hell out, we also haven't given enough credit to Adam Thielen for showing that he himself can be, a legit wide receiver 1 in Minnesota. And hey, having guys like Diggs and Jefferson around you help, but you know what? Jefferson and Diggs should be happy they've had someone like Thielen around them as well. He makes any offense he's in better, with his combination of just route running ability and sure hands. Adam Thielen, great football player, great real life, and great fantasy. Nobody is saying Adam Thielen needs to be in the conversation for the league's top 5 wide receivers, but I think you'd be hard-pressed to find 15 you'd rather have on your real life or fantasy squad. Dalvin Cook, 24 carries, 132 yards and a touchdown, just the usual from him. Also chipped in 5 catches. Look, he's in a situation next week. I believe they have the Saints on Christmas. That'll be a hell of a game. But, hey, I know the Saints have been good against running backs for the most part. It's not as much today, but look, it's Dalvin Cook. It's going to be very hard to get him out of that top overall spot. Maybe with Drew Brees back, we'll be going back to Alvin Kamara. But either way, Dalvin Cook, top 3 fantasy football running back in week 16. Heavy heart, everybody. Cordero Patterson suffered a knee injury. I'm not sure how severe. I will let you know. I am president of the Cordero Patterson fan club, after all. It's one of my many duties, but it sucks. Hasn't, he got knocked off his mantle as the league's all-time leader in yards per carry, minimum 100 attempts. That's gone away. He's still the best kick returner, not punt returner, kick returner in NFL history, but I hope this will not be a end of the season for Cordero Patterson. We'll see. I've enjoyed his action this year. I've already probably spent too much time talking about him right now, but please get better, CP. Many of us out there appreciate your contributions to the great game of football. Cordero Patterson is the only reason I can even consider changing my view on kickers. That's how much I love that man. PFF matchup stat: RBs with at least 5 games with 20 plus PPR points this year: Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, James Robinson, and David Montgomery. Not just, we can't just say, hey, Montgomery had that good end of the season stretch, and that's why he was a RB1. Shouldn't that be better than going off earlier in the year? You could say, oh, you wouldn't have made the playoffs with him, but it wasn't like he was that bad anyway. And I think, a lot of times, again, we just want to shape the narrative to what we kind of are preconceived notions. Montgomery has been a fantasy football RB1 in 2020. Give him the respect he deserves for accomplishing that. Next matchup: Seattle Seahawks beat the Washington football team 20-15. So this is one of those games where, again, this reminds me of the Patriots-Dolphins game. Do not feel like you need to go back and watch this one if you did not get a chance to. Russell Wilson, just 121 passing yards. I mean, he's now been under 215 passing yards in 3 of his last 5 games after clearing that with ease in each of his first 10 weeks of action. So, hey, we saw the rushing floor, and we talked about that on this podcast. 52 rushing yards for Russ is great, but, man, next week against the Rams, he's certainly not going to be in the top 5 quarterbacks, and if you're blessed enough to have 2 potential top 10 signal callers on the fantasy squad, I would probably advise going with the other guy. With this backfield, Chris Carson continued to be the workhorse, 74% snaps. Carlos Hyde just 15%, Rashad Penny 9%, but Carlos Hyde ripped off a 50-yard touchdown. Like, Carlos Hyde, the only guy that can vulture your starting running back from the 50-yard line. Unfortunately, Carson, 15 carries, 63 yards. He also had 2 catches for 6 yards, but Hyde got the touchdown. The only other touchdown went to Jacob Hollister. Wasn't the usual high-scoring Seahawks environment. Because of that, Carson could not cash in. I would expect Rashad Penny to be more involved next week, but look, it's still Carson's backfield. I think, it's not an easy matchup by any stretch against the Rams, but we did see him catch a touchdown again against them last time. He's got that receiving ability. DJ Dallas was taken off, and it was carted off, with an ankle injury. So with that in mind, Chris Carson, still anyone's idea of an upside RB2 in Week 16. Metcalf, only 5 catches, 43 yards. Tyler Lockett, 4 catches, 34 yards. I just worry that the Seahawks are starting to go back to this run-first approach and thinking that because they've got a few wins kind of with that strategy, that's what they need to do. We saw this against the Packers literally last season. They get into these games where Russ starts being efficient and then he finishes with freaking 30 pass attempts, and we wonder why he didn't throw more. How is DK Metcalf? How is DK freaking Metcalf only getting 6 targets per game? I know he had a few more where penalties, were wiping out a nice catch or two, and he did have the hamstring mini issued, though he didn't miss many snaps with it. But, come on, he should be getting 6 targets per game, 20 yards downfield, let alone the raw total. You would just think that could help open up the rest of this group, because we talked about it after the Jets game last week. They did not have a pass gain over 21 yards against the Jets last week. This week, the long was just 15. We have not seen the Seahawks offense have the explosive plays. Guess what will help open up your run game? Explosive pass plays down the field. They have been lacking that, and because of that, we've seen just a limited ceiling for this offense for the better part of the last month and a half. With the Washington football team, Dwayne Haskins, just pretty awful, 295 yards on 55 attempts, 1 touchdown to J.D. McKissick. That was easy enough, and also a pair of interceptions, took 4 sacks along the way. So, Haskins, I wouldn't call myself a Haskins defender. I am biased because I'm an Ohio State guy and, born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, so I want to see him do good. My biggest issue with the Haskins experience in Washington has been how the front office has handled it. First-round QB on a rookie contract is one of probably the most valuable asset you can have in the NFL. And just for them to bench him after that Ravens game when, he throws for over 300 yards and they leak out that, hey, he was bragging about his stats afterwards. That's why we decided to go to Alex Smith. It's tell yourself whatever you want, but now you just created a diva out of, I don't want to say thin air, but, awful lot of stories you hear come out of the Washington football team locker room compared to other organizations around the league. So Haskins, hard to say that he's been anything other than an awful quarterback over the past 2 seasons. I get that, but Washington football team has certainly not done themselves any favors with how they've handled the situation from that whole debacle, from deciding to keep him on the team this year anyway, even though clearly they, would have rather started with Kyle Allen. Just one of those situations all right, Haskins, he's not better than Alex Smith this year. Congrats, Washington. You were right. Well, you still drafted the guy in the first round last year, and what are you getting out of that investment? So just, not the only puzzling move we've seen this organization make over the years, but one of the more glaring ones in recent memory. Terry McLaurin, Logan Thomas balled out in this one, though. 7 catches, 77 yards for Terry on 12 targets. Logan Thomas, 13 catches for 101 yards on 15 targets. So not always going to see those target totals, but it is a condensed enough offense around them to feel good enough about continuing to treat Logan and Terry as a top 12, top 15 options at their respective positions. J.G. McKissick, though, he's someone that we've been calling a low-end RB2 with Antonio Gibson out. Might even have to bump him up in that mid-tier. 87% snaps for McKissick. Peyton Barber only 15%. We saw J.D. 13 carries, 51 yards. Also 9 catches, 56 yards, and a score. Even without Alex Smith, we were seeing him still eat in the passing game. They love using him in the slot, just on design screens. And look, Ron Rivera himself has compared McKissic, I hate it, but he compared him to Christian McCaffrey. He said he has a Christian McCaffrey skill set. I think Ron Rivera calls any running back that can feasibly work on 3 downs Christian McCaffrey. That's a story for another day. But look, Washington, I don't know why they love J.D. McKissic so much. They do. Fantasy football managers, as long as Antonio Gibson isn't on the table, we should love J.D. McKissic as well. He's going to be a top 20 option at the position in Week 16 as long as Antonio Gibson remains sidelined. Mentioned the DJ Dallas injury, so PFF Philly matchup stat. So Russell Wilson somehow did not take a sack in this one, but just 4.5 yards per attempt, and we saw the pressure getting to him for stretches. He got the interception he threw was tipped when he was trying to get over the pass rusher, and I would just like to point out that the Seattle Seahawks since 2015 have done almost nothing to surround him with any sort of high level talent on the offensive line. I understand they made the trade with the Texans a couple years ago to get their left tackle, and they've started to maybe address the position a little bit more in the draft, but you look at cap spending on the offensive line. In 2015, the Seahawks ranked 26th. In 2016, they ranked 31st. In 2017, they ranked 16th. In 2018, they ranked 21st. In 2019, they ranked 22nd. In 2020, they ranked 16th. I mean, for a team that just is always kind of adding these different pieces at running back, wide receiver, tight end, adding Olsen, like just all these kind of random guys, it seems like they're kind of throwing at the table, Josh Gordon flirting with AB and all that. Like, can we please just pay attention to the offensive line for once? So Russ, so you can, help your franchise quarterback out. It's a freaking miracle. This dude has never missed a game, despite kind of having his style of play of holding on to the ball. While it'd be great if they could build around him just a little bit more and maybe not rely on Russ to bail out the offensive line like he's been doing for the better part of the last decade. Next game, we had the Ravens defeat the Jaguars 40-14. Just a beat down this one. We'll try and move pretty quick through it. But Lamar Jackson helping out those faithful fantasy football managers. Hopefully you were able to get in the playoffs with them in the first place. But 243 yards through the air, 3 touchdowns. He had a bad pick early on trying to force it deep to Hollywood Brown double coverage, but only 5 incompletions on the day, and he had some pretty deep balls out there. Marquis Brown, 44 yards down the sideline. Also Mark Andrews for a couple big ones. He got Gus Edwards for a 34-yard catch after extending the play. Lamar Jackson was putting together some good throws out there. And look, he's never going to be someone that just sits in the pocket and makes the same sort of throws that, we've seen from Breeze and Rivers and Brady and those type of guys. But because he's not those guys, because he's someone that, he ran for 35 yards and a touchdown just a week after dismantling the Browns on the ground, because he has that, asset to his game, defenses defend him different. And because of that, when things do break down, he can, find his way to just bigger, more wide open pass completions like we saw with Gus Edwards, like we saw on that game-winning touchdown last week to Hollywood Brown. So you can call them fluky. I realize they're not as aesthetically pleasing as some of the leagues more, just drop back, normal quarterbacks, but they all count the same in fantasy land, and they all count, a touchdown counts the same however you score in the NFL as well. So Lamar Jackson, not the overall, QB1 we were expecting to be this year, but anyone's idea of a top, 5 quarterback again at this point. I mean, he is balling lately, everybody. And the big difference for him, and I'm looking at right now, they got the Giants next week. I do think it's going to be hard to keep him out of the top 5. I did a little study on Lamar Jackson right during their Week 7 bye just to see, what was going wrong with them, at least in the first couple months of the year. And the big difference was he wasn't running the ball as much as he had previously. But you look since that Week 7 bye, he's had 16 rush attempts, 13, 11, 13, 13, 9, and most recently 10. So before that bye, he only hit double digits once in the Ravens' first 6 games. So, we saw offseason reports about them wanting to throw the ball more, wanting to rely on Lamar Jackson's legs less. That's great. They tried that. Really didn't go that well. Now they're back to embracing the best part about Lamar Jackson's game. So I'm not saying this offense is fixed. That, is something that teams have been able to somewhat solve, at least in the 2020 season. But, when they face now the Cowboys, the Browns, and the Jaguars, at a minimum in those matchups, we have seen Lamar Jackson get back to looking like the star that we saw for almost the entirety of the 2019 season. With this backfield, J.K. Dobbins, RB1 season, everybody. 53% snaps. Not quite as high as we would have liked to see it. Gus Edwards was still there for 42%, but no Mark Ingram. Justice Hill was there for 9%. And yeah, Dobbins, 14 carries, 64 yards in his score. Gus had 9 carries, 42 yards. Dobbins is the preferred receiver, even though Gus ended up having 2 targets to Dobbins 1 in this one. But look, Lamar just usually takes off or throws downfield. He doesn't really get the running backs involved in the passing game. But hey, not every defense is going to be the Jaguars. I get that. Fournette. But, we saw the Giants not exactly shut down Nick Chubb and company this past Sunday night. So J.K. Dobbins, not a screaming RB1. He doesn't have the same sort of roles, a Jonathan Taylor or even a Cam Akers, mostly because of Lamar Jackson's presence and him taking away a lot of rush attempts on his own and not giving him a bunch of targets. But at a minimum, we have a great young running back in J.K. Dobbins. He has earned weekly upside RB2 treatment. With the Jaguars, Minshew, not the worst stat line. He kind of has a way of putting up a decent stat line even in a blowout loss, but 5 sacks. I believe they were 0 for 2 at least on fourth down conversions. He also lost a fumble. No receiver had more than 53 yards. Colin Johnson suffered a hamstring injury at one point, but the big news, James Robinson kept James' RB1 son season going with 16 carries, 35 yards, but more importantly, 3 catches, 18 yards, and a score on a pretty wheel route down the sideline. So he's been doing it all season. Might be it though. From PFF injury expert Mario Pilato, Robinson left the game due to an ankle injury that is believed to be a high ankle sprain. If he does have a sprained high ankle, that's going to be a likely inactive for Robinson in the fantasy football championship. So don't be cursing Robinson's name. He has been fantastic this year, completely overcoming expectations for an undrafted rookie free agent. I really hope the Jaguars give him every chance to be the man again in 2021. It's going to be one of the more interesting situations to watch in fantasy football in terms of what they do in the draft, what they do in free agency. But whatever happens, 2020, James RB1, son, love to see it, and we love to see it the whole way. Guys, I almost forgot to mention, Dez Bryant caught it. He caught a touchdown. I am so happy. I'm wearing my, Christmas, Merry Xmas, throw up the X sweater right now. I've had it on all day. I was ecstatic when it happened. Look, 3 targets, 1 catch for 11 yards. Didn't have that much separation, was just kind of able to get free on a scramble drill. Is he a fancy asset? Absolutely not. But Dez Bryant back in the end zone, throwing up the X, made me happy. That guy is my single favorite player of the past decade and probably ever. So PFF Lily stat, naturally, I gotta give my guy Dez a shout out. Most receiving touchdowns since 2010. Number 1, Rob Gronkowski with 84. Number 2, Jimmy Graham with 80. Number 3, Antonio Brown with 76. And number 4, Dez Bryant with 74. Nobody else has reached even 70. I said it before, I'll say it again. Point scorer football games, it's hard to come up with a better pure scorer of the football than Dez Bryant over the past decade. Okay, you might have 3, but give me prime Dez and a jump ball over just about anybody other than Megatron over the past decade. Quick shout out to our sponsors, all first-time depositors at Monkey Knife Fight that put at least $20 in their account while using promo code PFF will receive a free PFF Edge annual subscription. That's a $40 value for just $20, and you'll get the opportunity to turn that $20 into even more money playing daily fantasy and prop games at one of the fastest-growing fantasy sports sites in the USA and Monkey Knife Fight. So go to Monkey Knife Fight, deposit your $20 for promo code PFF today to receive your free PFF Edge annual subscription. Now, for the main event. Not really, but Jets 23, Rams 20. Congrats, Jets. You got a win. You probably missed out on Trevor Lawrence. The Jacksonville Jaguars have the tiebreaker for having an easier schedule and only having the 1 win. And, you look at the Jaguars' last 2 games. They got the Colts in week 17. I'm looking up who they have next week right now. Yeah, like I said, Colts in week 17 and the Bears in week 16. So, maybe Trubisky just really can't put it together. He is nicknamed Midwest Bortles after all. It'd be kind of fitting, but I just do not see this edition of the Jaguars putting up much of a fight in either of those games and likely landing themselves Trevor Lawrence because of it. So, it was hardly a game that Jets fans are going to remember for years and years and years. Sam Darnold just had another, ho-hum performance, not too much going on, 270 yards and an easy unguarded touchdown on Ty Johnson. His best throw of the day was to Braxton Berrios rolling out, and he hit him in the hands, but Berrios dropped it. Would have been a nice 20-yard touchdown. So Darnold, again, he makes 1 or 2 solid throws a day. That makes you wonder what he could be like in a post-case offense, but I just don't think, as it stands, we can expect much from him in the current iteration of this Jets team. Frank Gore, 23 carries, 59 yards, and a touchdown. Why not? They love Frank Gore. Who doesn't love Frank Gore? I know Adam Gase loves him some Frank Gore. I got Chris Herndon, 3 catches, 48 yards. Jamison Crowder, 6 catches, 66 yards. I think we have talked enough about the Jets. With the Rams, this collapse pretty much came out of nowhere. I mean, Jared Goff, look, he threw a 16-yard touchdown to Robert Woods on a deep out. I think that was the only time all day that I saw him, actually complete like a tough downfield throw. It was just bad out there, guys. I mean, 1 interception, 3 sacks, didn't lose a fumble, but they just couldn't get the ball moving. And I mean, look, on the ground, it wasn't great, but they still averaged 6 yards per carry. A lot of that was buoyed by Robert Woods, breaking off for a 40-yarder. But come on, it's the Jets. We've seen everyone move the ball on this guy. And other than Higbee having a 44-yard catch and run, none of these other players had a long gain of even 16. So that's been the one missing ingredient, I think, in this Los Angeles offense is the lack of a true field stretcher that can put any level of fear in opposing defenses. Josh Reynolds, he's caught deep passes before, but he's not exactly a burner. Van Jefferson has been someone that they just can't really get too involved in the offense. He has, a nice route every couple of weeks or something, but neither of those guys, again, put that Brandon Cooks level of fear into the defense. Would not be shocked if we see, this offseason, really Sean McVay try to add, some serious speed to at least one of those spots. I do think that's the one spot that they're really missing right now. In the backfield, Cam Akers continued to dominate snaps, 61%. He suffered an ankle injury, missed a little bit of time, but either way, Malcolm Brown only 27%, Darrell Henderson 13%. We saw Akers get 15 of the backfield, 17 carries, only 63 yards. A little bit deceiving. There was some, hooligans going out play, nullified 18-yard touchdown run, then had an electric 25-yard run, also nullified on a holding penalty. I get it. Would the runs have happened without the holding penalty? It's debatable, so, you don't have to necessarily call it an unlucky performance. But just realize, he was still showing some of the elusiveness, some of the big playability that, made us rank him so highly in the first place in this. So nothing has happened with this backfield. Cam Akers, I know, it's this quote unquote dud is going to leave a bad taste in the mouths of, most fantasy football managers. But next week against the Seahawks, he is going to be a recommended start in fantasy football leagues of all shapes and sizes, people. He has the, just that role we want. A Sean McVay RB1. That's what we saw Todd Gurley and even CJ Anderson just reward us with league-winning performances, seemingly week after week after week. So Cam Akers couldn't give us that in this one, but I would not, bet against him doing the opposite of that in week 16. Cooper Kupp did not come up big in this one. That was not a short joke. He's not that short. 5 catches, 39 yards on 5 targets, no scores. Robert Woods had the big game. 6 catches, 56 yards and a touchdown. And mentioned he had that 40-yard rush. So, it's kind of been back and forth, the guys, between for most of the year. Robert Woods is kind of making a late surge and coming out as the true number 1 in LA. But again, I really think they add someone else to the equation. We'll see what happens. They just need something else to, get this offense going. To put up 20 points against the Jets, man, at home, it's disappointing. There's no other way around it. And to have Goff, again, not play great by any stretch of the imagination, but this wasn't one of his just overwhelming stinkers that we've seen over the years in terms of just turning the ball over 100 times. They just couldn't really move it consistently. And to me, that's even more troubling. So lack of big plays, lack of a big play specialist. I do not see the Rams really having a good chance of overcoming this in the playoffs. They just, they're going to be facing a lot more explosive offenses. So maybe they can figure it out, but I just feel like you get in the playoffs sometimes and teams start trying to really make you, march down the field in 12, 14 plays. I'm not sure Goff is, able to just do that consistently enough, and he's not, creating the sort of big plays that could help overcome his lack of ability in that. So we'll see what happens. The fact the Rams are still 9-5 has exceeded my expectations for them this year. Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, this defense can still step up and win them football games. Just are not seeing this offense, really after that Tampa Bay win where they were just dominant. I really thought we'd be seeing the Rams start to peak towards the end of the season. At least on the offensive side of the ball, it does not appear to be the case at this time. Quickly with the injuries, I mentioned Akers got banged up with the ankle. He did return. Also, Gerald Everett apparently had a head injury at one point. So if Gerald Everett's out, Tyler Higbee is going to shoot to the top of the rankings. I mean, they've both been playing near full-time roles in recent weeks. They're just not doing as many 3 wide receiver formations. But just realize, you take away Higbee or Everett, we are firing up that other guy with confidence in fantasy land. PFF Lily matchup stat. So Robert Woods rushing yards. In 2018, he was 3rd among all wide receivers with 157 rushing yards. In 2019, 115 yards, that was 3rd. 2020, 154 rushing yards, 1st among all wide receivers. Overall is 426 rushing yards over the past 3 seasons. Is 1st among all wide receivers. Curtis Samuel is the only other guy over 400. So truly, Robert Woods, he is such a game changer with this extra, rushing workload, and we've seen it now for 3 straight years. So that was, the reasoning, if you were following myself in the preseason, for going Woods over Kupp, because it was look, hey, their targets usually pretty equal, but Woods gets a legit 18 to 25 extra rush attempts per year, and that adds up over over the season. Today was a good example of us benefiting from that. Just 3 more games, everybody. Thank you as always for sticking with me here. Cardinals defeated the Eagles 33-26. Wow, what a game from Jalen freaking Hurts. And so our big takeaway from last week was Jalen Hurts is a must-start in fantasy, legit QB1. I mean, I was so nervous because I told people to start Hurts over Justin Herbert, over Ryan Tannehill, who both had great games. Luckily, Hurts came through. I don't know if he actually outscored those guys. They put up some huge points, but either way, you're not too concerned about going with Hurts because he was fantastic here. 338 yards, 3 touchdowns through the air, another 63 yards, and a touchdown on the ground. We knew he had that rushing production in him, but to see him go through the air like this, it wasn't perfect, okay? 6 sacks taken, but more than enough big plays. I mean, I think he had 7 completions of at least 20 yards. I mean, hey, the touchdown to Quez Watkins, 32-yard screen. He had a, Miles Sanders break loose for 26 at one point, but at the same time, we can call these tic-tac plays at some point, but Alshon Jeffrey, Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert, like all these guys were having some nice plays downfield as well, and it's not like they were consistently separating. Jeffrey, I was actually drawing some flags on Patrick Peterson, old PPED out there, and for Hurts just to put the ball in a position for him to get that flag says a lot about his ability to drop the ball downfield in the tight windows. So he's not the most polished passer yet, but at a minimum, we now know that he can put up a type of passing performance like this to be a legit fantasy QB1 rock star at this point. I mean, this is like the sort of production that we've been getting from, a freaking Kyla Murray, Lamar Jackson. Like this sort of rushing usage is just so rare among all quarterbacks. And to pair that with actual high-end passing ceiling, like that's what we saw now. That's what we have in Jalen Hurts. We have one of the most active quarterbacks in the league in terms of running the ball. And now we know he also has 300 plus passing yards and 3 touchdown upside in his back pocket as a passer. So I'm not saying he's going to be, just killing defenses from the pocket, but going against the Saints last week, he posted PFF's third single worst just PFF passing grade in a game by a rookie QB this year. Looked worlds better in ahead of that. And hey, that was his first start against a freaking really good Saints defense. So, we weren't writing him off as a passer by any stretch, but this just really reinforces the idea that, particularly in week 16 against the Cowboys, I mean, look, we're not going to be putting the guy overall QB1, but I will say he will be a top 5 QB for that smash spot against the Cowboys. Just brutal run defense. So Jalen Hurts, fantastic performance. Had 2 Hail Mary attempts at the end to try to win it, just couldn't quite get the ball into the end zone. So not perfect. I mentioned the 6 sacks. He also had 3 fumbles. Can't have that. The touchdowns weren't overly impressive. 2 short ones to Greg Ward and a screen to Watkins, but again, not exactly getting a bunch of separation otherwise. So fantastic game from Jalen Hurts. Also, we'll just note that Miles Sanders was out there playing, 82% of the offensive snaps, 17 carries, 64 yards. Boston Scott was still out there for a little bit, but it does seem like with Hurts under center, they are back to giving Sanders that, true featured workhorse role. I know there were some concerns about Jordan Howard and stuff like that, but hey, against the Cowboys, guys, Miles Sanders, top 8 RB, no doubt about it. With the Cardinals, hey, can't say all these nice things about Jalen Hurts and not return the same favor to Kyla Murray. 406 passing yards, 3 touchdowns and an interception. Also continued his, quest to get back to running. 8 carries, 29 yards, and a touchdown. He now has 21 carries over the past 2 weeks after having just 15 in the 3 previous games. So most of this production was going to Deandre Hopkins. 9 catches, 169 yards, and a touchdown on just 11 targets. Nobody else had more than 5 targets for the Cardinals. So thought this could be the spot we see, Christian Kirk get back in action, but instead Larry Fitzgerald had a nice touchdown catch in the back of the end zone. Old man Fitz. Max Williams popped off for a big 42-yard gain at one point, but look, it was DeAndre Hopkins. The touchdown was this beautiful kind of back shoulder contested play where, Hopkins, he gets a mitt on one of those balls and it just looks like a normal person holding a baseball. His hands are so freaking big, but, he put the ball in his general vicinity and he's going to come down with it. And that was the case for most of the evening. So Kyla Murray, going into like to week 11, before he stopped running the ball, he was literally averaging the most fantasy points per game ever in a single season at the quarterback position. He is right back in the top 5. So looking ahead to, their week 16 matchup, you are going to have to really have a stacked roster to find, any reason to put Kyler on the bench. Yeah, I know it's the 49ers. It's not the easiest matchup we've ever seen, but hey, week 1 against the good version of the 49ers defense, Kyler gave us a top 5 performance with his performance as a rusher. So the only concern we have with Kyler briefly was he wasn't running as much. Those problems are in the past. His shoulder seems healthier than ever. Kyler Murray is back to being a rock solid upside QB1. Quickly with this backfield, Yeah, not great, everyone. It looks like Chase Edmonds was maybe going to miss, and they were saying before the game he was going to be limited. Not quite. 52% snaps for Edmonds, 51% for Drake. Chase actually had 11 carries compared to 10 for Drake, and even looking at receiving, it was Chase, at 5 targets. Drake only had 2, so Chase was the lead RB1, and he didn't, completely blow away Drake. He did look better out there, as has been the case throughout most of the season, but no, I don't think there's this, takeover now in Week 16. I think we're going to continue to see them split the snaps, as they largely have ever since Kenyon Drake came back from the ankle injury. This renders both really as, RB3s, particularly in a not ideal matchup against the 49ers. We saw Tony Pollard have some success, but I just think the touch floor is too low for either of these guys to really feel too confident about running them out there in Week 16. One injury. Jalen Rager suffered an ankle injury. Team high 8 targets before that happened, so keep an eye. I don't love any of these Philly receivers still or the tight ends just because, Hurts was spreading the ball out enough as it was. Dallas Goedert was someone that, had 8 targets as well, so I guess he would be someone that could potentially benefit. And obviously on the outside, Watkins, Fulgham, Jeffrey. But I just think Hurts is spreading the ball around too much. This offense is still wants to be a run-heavy unit, which I think they can be against the Cowboys. Wouldn't be overly optimistic about any of these wide receivers stepping up if Rager is ultimately sidelined. Beautiful in matchup stats. So one spot of Hopkins' game that has really shined more so in Arizona than I think it did in Houston is his ability after the catch. We know he can do it all. He had that wild play against the Cowboys, I think in 2017, where he was, spinning around like 3 times on his way to getting the game-winning, getting them in position for the game-winning field goal in overtime. No one's ever doubted his ability after the catch, but he's truly doing better than ever in that aspect of his game this year. Career high, 19 missed tackles forced this season. Previously, he had never cleared 14, and we still got 2 weeks left. So part of that is just getting the ball more in screens and closer to the line of scrimmage. He has a career low 9.5 yard average target depth, but DeAndre Hopkins, a lot of these number 1 wide receivers, we focus more on just like the truly most elite version of the game. For Hopkins, I would say that's his contested catch ability. He can come down with freaking anything that's in his wingspan. It's absolutely ridiculous. But truly, you put the ball in DeAndre Hopkins' hands, there are not too many defenders that can take him down one-on-one. Quick shout out to our sponsors. Subscribe to PFF's Elite Annual Subscription using promo code ACTION to receive a year of Elite subscription access and 1 year, 365 days of Action Pro subscription access through Action Network for just $199.99. Action Pro is Action Network's premium subscription offering tailor-made services to make avid and new bettors better. This is a limited time offer that is currently only made available now through the Super Bowl, which is February 7th, 2020. This offer also only applies to first-time Elite Annual subscribers, so good stuff there with our fine friends over at the Action Network. Game of the week, Chiefs beat the Saints 32-29. Vintage Patrick Mahomes performance. He didn't put up huge numbers, but my goodness, this guy made a good 4 or 5 plays that, we always like to joke about, in other games, like, hey, if, Mahomes had done this, it'd be all over ESPN for next week. Well, Mahomes made about 5 throws that do literally deserve to be all over ESPN for next week. Maybe his best throw of the day, in my opinion, was him just rolling out, somehow squeezing the ball like 30 yards downfield on the run to Sammy Watkins, and it just went right off his hands. So I don't want to pick on Sammy. He had a couple nice catches in this game, finished with 60 yards. He's been fine, even though he is having another season where the dude balls the hell out in week 1 and does absolutely nothing the rest of the year. I'm sure he'll have a good playoff run, as he always does. But again, it was just such a great throw. It's unfortunate it didn't come down with the catch, but we still saw plenty of other great throws throughout the day. Travis Kelce, 8 catches, 68 yards, and a touchdown. That was more or less just a goal line kind of shovel thing. It was like I think the broadcast, Romo described it as like a, chest pass in basketball. Just the things Mahomes is doing is always so weirdly amazing. But Tyree Kill, 6 catches, 53 yards, and a touchdown. And we also saw Mecole Hardman with 9 targets, 3 catches, 22 yards, and a score. The touchdown to Hardman was probably the prettiest scoring throw. Just Mahomes going to his left, throwing the ball in just the smallest window in the back left-hand corner of the end zone. And Mecole, to his credit, had a nice little toe drag swag there as well. So starting to see Mecole finally come up ahead of DeMarcus Robinson. Maybe Robinson fumbling a punt into their own end zone to force a safety should have been a touchdown, but Alex Anzalone pushed the ball out the back for a touchback. Maybe we're finally seeing Mecole Hardman get on the field ahead of Robinson.
Look, more goes into football than just pure speed, but you look at Mecole and the things he's done on a yards per target basis. I just really find it hard to believe the Chiefs' offense is worse with Mecole Hardman on the field compared to Marcus Robinson. But still not someone we can exactly just fire up as a realistic fantasy option next week, other than just a boomer bust kind of wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 type. But hopefully 2021 is finally the year we see Mecole really break away in this offense. With the backfield, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he was running well on one of the league's best run defenses, 14 carries for 79 yards, but he got tackled super awkwardly. It was like doing the splits, and it looks like it's going to be a hip leg injury that could keep him out for quite some time. So fingers crossed, I'm knocking on wood, but not looking good for Clyde. Le'Veon got banged up at the end with a horse collar tackle. He did pop up though and seemed okay on the sideline. So look, if Clyde's out, it's going to be Le'Veon Bell is going to be the recommended ad, but just realize, everybody, this is not a situation it's surprisingly not been really all that helpful for fantasy-friendly running backs this year. And when we did see Clyde out before, it was almost split 50-50 between Le'Veon and Darrell Williams. So, hey, we saw Le'Veon, he really worked ahead of Darrell Williams seemingly throughout most of this one. Williams only had 3 carries, Le'Veon 15. Le'Veon had the backfield's only target, but make sure you check out the Wednesday edition of this podcast. I'm talking to Dwayne McFarland. He has one of the best pieces of writing on the internet in the utilization report. And one of the things we always look at are, what are the snaps in 2-minute, pass down situations. So I have a feeling we're going to get there, and we're going to see Darrell Williams is still their 2-minute back. Looking at the snap splits, it was Clyde 45% snaps, Le'Veon 33%, Darrell Williams 23%. So I don't think it's going to be this, workhorse role. You absolutely need to start Le'Veon. I think he's going to be pretty much what Clyde's been, top 20 back, closer to 20 than 10. Certainly not someone we need to necessarily jam in the lineups because the Chiefs continue to let Patrick Mahomes throw to his heart's desires. All right, with the Saints, Drew Brees, 15 for 34, oh man, it's rough. And he didn't play terrible. He threw a nice bomb to Emmanuel Sanders for 51 yards, shaking off all the noodle arm jokes we've been making all season. Also a nice touchdown down the seam to, Lil Jordan Humphrey, former Texas wide receiver that's got some cool looking dreads. But look, other than that, he wasn't throwing to a ton of people. I mean, Michael Thomas was out with the ankle injury. Traquan Smith got hurt with an ankle injury. But I mean, at some point, you only got Alvin Kamara 3 catches. Luckily, he took one of them in for a touchdown. Latavius Murray took a short pass, 24 yards for a touchdown. Just not the performance you want to see from Brees. And, he's saying that he's not 100%, but don't fight your way to go on the field and then lose and then, start blaming your health for it. So we know you're not 100%, man. And, it's still 3 touchdowns against the Chiefs. They only lost by 3 after they were able to kind of drive down the field, down 2 scores at the end. But, yeah, just, only lost by 3 to defending champs. Nothing to be too ashamed of, but hardly something to feel too confident about with the Saints entering the playoff season because, again, same issue as last year. I just don't know if they really have a consistent threat to go downfield. Okay, Emmanuel Sanders had this nice 51-yarder in this one, but it was almost because Honey Badger just seemingly didn't believe Brees actually would take that shot. Look, we've seen it. Their past 2 exits against the Vikings, I just feel like teams, specifically the Vikings when they played them, they clamp up, they double Kamara and Michael Thomas underneath, and they dare anybody else to beat them. Emmanuel Sanders has truly been great over the past 2 years. The fact he played 17 games last year in the regular season, coming off the injury, 17, with the trade, midseason trade to the 49ers. I mean, he is truly a warrior out there, and he was a better ball touchdown. It was a better ball away from scoring the go-ahead touchdown in the Super Bowl. Emmanuel Sanders still has it. He's balled out this year too, but I just don't know if he is truly the difference maker to take this offense from the awesome regular season to, middling postseason year that we've seen for the better part of the back half of Brees' time with the team. So, hey, they should have Michael Thomas back for the playoffs. That's going to be huge, but they just don't still have, that true field-stretching guy on the outside, and losing Traquan Smith doesn't help matters too. Deontay Harris has been out for a little bit. Just a troubling lack of, overall field stretching speed on the field for the Saints. Let's see. Alvin Kamara played, 73% snaps against Latavius Murray, 27% snaps, only 4 carries for Latavius. So, it wasn't the overall just boom performance we were hoping for from Kamara with this first game with Brees back in the lineup. But people, this is still a good thing. I mean, without Taysom on the center, we can expect Kamara in a more normal game where where he's not going, 15 for 34, where the guy that's been leading the NFL in completion rate gets a little bit closer to that 70% mark, which I think he will do against a much lesser version of the Vikings defense that he's used to seeing, that he gets week 16 at home again. So certainly expecting a bounce back performance from this passing game in that spot. PFF Philly matchup stat. So Travis Kelce is about to join Tony Gonzalez as the only tight ends with 5 seasons as the number 1 fantasy PPR tight end since 2000. 5 seasons. For Kelce, it has been 5 consecutive seasons. 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. One after another, number 1 PPR tight end in the game. And look, again, Tony Gonzalez also has 5. Gronk only had 3. Jimmy Graham, Jason Witten, Antonio Gates, they only had 2 such seasons. Like, this production that Kelce is putting up is absolutely wild. And as we were talking about in last week's podcast, I mean, look, he's their number 1 tight end. He's the number 1 tight end in the league, but I feel like that's almost disrespectful at this point. He should be in the arguments for a number 1 pass catcher in the league. He's been putting up the numbers to deserve that. Look, I'm not saying we would take Kelce over a Metcalf, over a Devontae when it comes down to that, but you know what? We would take him over a lot of number 1 wide receivers, and the fact that we could have a conversation, is Kelce in, the top 15, top 12 of the overall number 1 pass game options, just shows you how special he has been at the tight end position. Last game, everybody, Sunday Night Football was not exactly a barn burner. The Browns took it to the Giants 20-6. Baker Mayfield was just another excellent game. 27 for 32, 297 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. The guy had had the string of 3 games where the weather in Cleveland was just awful. Ever since, he has been doing nothing except balling out. So, only took 1 sack in this one. The Giants hardly made life too difficult for him. No James Bradbury out there. They couldn't rush the passer throughout the game. Again, it's not like Baker has done a ton over this stretch that has just said, hey, this is now someone that when he's getting pressure, he can consistently make the right decision and all that. When you look at his stats this year, he's been a top 10 quarterback when he's kept clean. When he goes under pressure, that's when all the problems arise. But hey, we see Stefanski utilizing play action more than ever. They have this great run game with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt he's able to lean on. And now that, in this post-OBJ version of the offense, which at this point, it's hard to dispute that they've been better without OBJ, but come on, the ceiling with OBJ is objectively better. We just know that he is better than Rashard Higgins, than Donovan Peoples-Jones. In my opinion, Jarvis Landry, although the numbers aren't backing me up lately, but the difference is that Baker Mayfield is no longer force-feeding the ball to Odell Beckham. We're seeing that, just in spades, really, in this one in particular. Jarvis Landry, 8 targets, Rashard Higgins, 5, Hooper had 6. He's spreading the ball around. He's throwing it to the guy that the ball should be going to, instead of trying to force feed one individual player. So ideally, they could put Beckham back into this offense. Baker keeps spreading the ball around, and then eventually, when it's time to go to OBJ in one-on-one situations, he's going to win them because that's what he's done his entire career. So yes, the Browns are better off with Baker not force-feeding the ball to OBJ, but if Baker could just not force the ball to OBJ and run the offense with OBJ as a part of it, I think we would see a better version of the Browns offense. So, one of those things that I guess it's hard for me to, necessarily prove that with Baker having such a problem with, not force feeding Beckham when he's out there. But again, we know Beckham's a great wide receiver. I hate this argument. I still feel like it's too small of, just a on-off splits with it. Hopefully the Browns in 2021 with Beckham back in the lineup can finally get the best of both worlds and bring this connection. Because, I was more excited than almost anyone to see Baker and Beckham originally look up. I've been a long time, OBJ, just number 1 wide receiver in the league truther, and I know that sounds, more ridiculous than ever in the year 2020, but it truly was a conversation not that long ago. So hopefully when Beckham gets healthy, they can go back to balling. But hey, right now it's Jarvis Landry's world. We're just living in it. 7 catches, 61 yards, and a score. After the touchdown, was talking all sorts of shit and drew a unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. Gotta love Jarvis Landry, always blessing him after he finishes scoring on him. But great throw from Baker on that touchdown, rolling out to his right and just pegged it right in a small window to Landry. So Hooper also had a touchdown from the goal line, just wasn't even a contested play. Nobody guarded him. So Nick Chubb, 15 carries, Kareem Hunt only 7. We talked about it. This was not a great game for Kareem Hunt, and Nick Chubb is that, consistent top 10 back. Kareem Hunt's the one that can have a little more problem in games like this where yes, the Browns were leading throughout, but they never got to complete blowout game script, and they weren't ever down in completely negative game script. So when they're in more neutral-esque situations like this, that's where Nick Chubb just usually ends up being up on the field a bit more often than Kareem. Quickly with the Giants, look, going in this week, the message from the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast was simple. Do not feel like you have to play anybody from this offense. That's exactly what we saw. Colt McCoy, only 221 passing yards. We saw him only go for, I believe, 110, or it was even fewer than that against the Seahawks. And look, we've now had 8 quarters with Colt McCoy. They have had 2 touchdown drives. both against the Seahawks. Those consisted of 9 total passing yards from Colt McCoy to cover the 132 combined yards. Unless Wayne Gallman, Alfred Morris, Dion Lewis, unless any of these running backs want to pick up the yards, Colt McCoy is not going to drive them down the field. Hey, he's a veteran quarterback. I'm sure, he tries to execute the play as the coaches draw it out. He doesn't go off script, but the range of outcomes with someone like Colt McCoy under center are just so low. And maybe the floor isn't as low as it would be with, a more volatile option, but the ceiling certainly isn't anywhere near high enough to feel good about going to the well with him or anybody else involved in this offense in Week 16. Wayne Gallman, 9 carries. Alfred Morris had 7. I mean, guys, no, do not start anybody from this Giants offense in Week 16. It's unfortunate. Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, even Evan Ingram recently. There's nothing wrong with these pass game options, but as long as McCoy's under center, the floor is just far too low for everyone involved. Now we're going to a matchup that's in Baltimore. Even if Daniel Jones comes back, him playing in the kind of reduced mobility that we saw last time, that's just not something that we can come even close to feeling good about. So stay the hell away from the Giants in Week 17. That's going to do it, everybody. Thank you as always for tuning in to the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Schedule for this week, I know we got Christmas. I hope everyone has a very happy holiday season. So we will be going, podcasts up until Thursday. We'll not be doing a Friday edition. So we got Friday Night Football and some Saturday games. Make sure you check out pff.com. We'll have some DFS and injury-related content that, I probably would have gotten to on that Friday podcast. So we'll still have all the information there for you. I just will not be there to speak about it this Friday in particular. But hope Week 15 went well. We're on the Week 16. Let's go get that championship. Not every day you get to play for a championship. For a lot of us, that will be this weekend. So best of luck to that, everybody. Thank you again for listening. I'm Ian Hartitz. Until next time, take care, everybody.